and the book tells me where to put my piece. And so he's reading and I put my piece there and he puts his piece in. So like, it's not me playing, I'm playing the book.
Yeah.
And then when it's all done, he said, that was the greatest game of chess ever played.
It's like a replay of
It's a replay of the greatest game that ever played of chess. I was like, oh, awesome.
That's so fun.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I didn't sell a house to him, and I didn't do anything other than play chess with the guy. So it was,
experience.
yeah. So now I can tell that story. But no, for prospecting, if you can get yourself to do door knocking, there is definitely profitable. If you look at, like, I've tracked all of my transactions and where their sources are from, and the return on investment of time and contacts on that far exceeds all the other ones, except for SOI. SOI for me, like for most agents, is the biggest one, but for just normal prospecting. So you would think that it would be something I would be like, oh, I'm super excited, I'd love to go door knocking. But there's something about approaching somebody's door and walking through the neighborhood. Like I overanalyze it. You know, you come up to a gate and you're like, there's gotta be a dog because there's a gate. And then, you know, you see the sign that everyone has, no soliciting. Well, some people don't care about that and some people are really adamant about that.
So you think that's more successful because you're right in front of the person versus being on the phone?
I think so.
I think so, probably too.
Yeah, you can read the body language. You can see, because somebody on the phone can be like, yeah, this is a great idea. And behind they're rolling their eyes and they're just like, yeah, I don't, just get off the phone, get off the phone.
More
Where
genuine, more
if you're
genuine.
standing in front of somebody and they're interested, you know they're interested because they're standing in there and the way they're acting shows interest versus, yeah, they're just like, you get somebody opens the door and they're slowly shutting the door while you're talking.
Yeah.
You know they're not really super interested. All right, so there's your door knocking. But no, Justin, I didn't put accountability on it, but it was profitable for that week. Saved me the $50. I do other accountabilities for stuff though. If I get off track, I'll always go back to my accountability.
I was just letting you know I was paying attention, that's all.
There you go. All right, well, maybe I should ask you specific questions because that was probably only 1 minute you were listening. Just kidding.
Fire away.
All right, so listing presentation today. I'm gonna write these words on the board and I want you to think to yourself what you think is most important, okay? I don't know if the Zoom can see this quarter, but I'm gonna use this quarter. Okay, setting appointment. Presentation.
Showing up on time.
The close. Okay?
Presentation.
Okay, so we got setting appointment, presentation, and close. All of them are important to get paid. You have to do every single one of them to get paid. But which one do you think is most important as an agent to really feel comfortable with?
Presentation.
Okay, you can say presentation. Okay, there's one vote there. What do you guys think? And online, what's your vote?
Setting an appointment.
Okay, so one vote for setting appointment.
They all seem important.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, so you have to do them all. I'm just saying which one could be, in your opinion, the most important. And I'll share with you what I think, but it doesn't mean that I'm right. Justin says setting appointments most important. If that's most important to him, that's fine. There's not a wrong answer here. I just want to see what you guys think. And I'll share you with why I think mine is at the end.
I just feel like setting an appointment and the close don't occur if you don't create a good presentation. Like, you're not gonna get
Yeah,
appointment
but you're not
set.
gonna get to a presentation without an appointment set too. What would you say?
I mean, I'm just saying this just to throw it out there and I'm not actually sure. I mean, so there's not a right answer, but
Uh-huh.
closing because I did a job, and this is like my first real job was selling Cutco cutlery.
Mm-hmm. Hey, that's where I started.
Really?
Cutco, knives.
Yeah,
Mhm.
great job. But I think there's like strong parts on all of it. Setting the appointment taught me a lot, and the presentation taught me a lot too, even though I was terrible at it. But you know, like with people that really trust you and want to support you, you could just close, you know, like almost like without even talking to them. Because if they really wanted to buy something from you, they could just be like, oh yeah, I'll take the scissors, you know, and that's it. So I'm just gonna say close would be mine. That's
Okay, I like that, I like the logic,
connection.
okay, all right, do you have one?
I mean, most important. Not really, I guess I would say presentation since that's what we're gonna talk about next.
You're like, I know there's a method to his madness, and we're talking about presentation, so maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I like the logic
You
too.
can set an appointment, but if you get there and your presentation's crappy, the appointment's
Yeah.
irrelevant.
Okay, Cody or
Jason, I think it's presentation because you really have to like put yourself out there and sell yourself, and be, you know, confident in order to get their business. So for me personally, I think it's presentation.
Okay, I like that. Okay, Joe, you got an opinion?
I think it's setting appointment.
Okay, there we go. Close, what got one, setting appointment 2, presentation 3. Okay, so for me personally, I'm gonna go with the presentation, and here's the reason why. Now, when I say there's not a wrong one, if you don't know how to set appointments, you're never gonna be able to give the best presentation ever. You're never going to, okay? But if you don't give a good presentation, you're never gonna be able to close either. Now, a presentation, what you were saying, I think is correct. How long does a presentation have to be?
Not long.
Not long at all. In fact, your presence being there could be your presentation. You can lose the listing or the buyer based on how you come into the presentation. If you come in and you offend them in some way, or if you are not what they want, it doesn't matter your presentation, they're gonna choose. Does that make sense? So the presentation can be long or short. In fact, I'm gonna show you how, the longer your presentation goes, the less likely you're going to get the transaction. Okay, so there's a real sweet spot for real estate, but what you're saying was absolutely right, is if I know somebody, they trust me already, my presentation had begun when I met them, and so they feel good about that. I might only need to close, but in my thought process, if you didn't have that presentation, closing would be really difficult. So here's my logic. If you have a really strong presentation, you want to share it. You want to tell people about it. So when you get on the phone and somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about selling, all of a sudden your brain goes, I want to present to you. I need to present to you because what I have to say is really important. So you actually are more motivated and excited to set this appointment. Then you give the presentation. If you give a great presentation will lead into an easy close. If your presentation sucks, if it's really difficult and choppy, when you get to this closing, it's going to be an awkward thing. Does that make sense? So that's where I look at it as a presentation. You have to learn all 3 of these skills, but today we're going to talk specifically about the presentation. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to go through an outline. So this is my actual presentation. This is one I've been working on for 15 years. Okay, so you can see that, you know, there's lots of changes, things I've crossed out, scribbled, added to it, just so that I can make it my own. And you guys, I want you guys to do the same thing, okay? Not my presentation, but a presentation that's comfortable for you. Because the way I say things, it might not be the same that you would say it. You might want to emphasize certain aspects of your skill set where mine are emphasized differently here. Does that make sense? But what I want you to look at is the presentation evolves, it changes. The presentation I gave 10 years ago might not be the same presentation that I'm going to give today. It's going to have some elements of it, but it's going to change. So you can see like this big line right here. As I started giving my presentation, I felt that my opening was really, really long, and people that I was talking to, it would almost start to create this like, oh, seriously, is this gonna be a long presentation? And I didn't want that feeling, so I cut out a huge chunk of my presentation. Does that make sense? There's keys to a great presentation. We're gonna talk about these first, and then we'll get into the outline. But if you look at keys to a great presentation, I'll label that. Okay, number one is you have to have some kind of a connection. Okay, connection, we call it rapport. And when you have rapport, I look at it as feeling comfortable. Okay, if you don't feel comfortable with somebody, are you gonna let them lead you? Think about in your own scenario. If you have somebody who just makes you uncomfortable, are you gonna listen to what they're saying? No, okay? So the idea is that we wanna create a connection and rapport. Now, the interesting thing about rapport is sometimes we start rapport with something that's a commonality, something that you and I have that are similar. So I walk into a house, I'm looking around and I see something that I connect with, okay? If I connect with it, that can start this process, but if I only stay with something that's familiar to me, the rapport will just be broken based off of other things we're not connecting with. Does that make sense? So let me give you an example. Have any of you guys been out of the country before?
I've been to Mexico.
Mexico? You already went to the cenote days?
Not been to the Sonata.
After yesterday?
Been to a festival in Mexico, but never gone there.
Okay, so Mexico, okay? When you were in Mexico, did you ever see somebody with a shirt that you knew was from the United States?
Not really, yeah.
Not really? Did you? Okay, where were you? Where were you at?
Oh.
Country?
Country, Spain.
Spain. Okay, so in Spain, did you see anybody that had something that you knew was from the United States? Okay, and what did you feel when you saw them?
Connection, felt, hey, we're from the same place.
Yeah, we're from the same place. We connected, right?
Yeah.
What if you were walking in Spain and somebody came with a shirt that said Salt Lake City, Utah?
Oh yeah, we'd be like family.
We'd be family, right? Okay, so that's the commonality that we have. So we instantly have this connection. I created some rapport. I created this feeling because of seeing that shirt. But then you start to talk to them and they say, oh, I've never been there. I just found this shirt. I have no idea what you're talking about. Now all of a sudden, what happened to that connection?
It's not really there anymore.
It's not there anymore, right? Okay, because you're like, I'm connecting with this one thing, and then we find out really that it's not what I thought it was, the connection's broken. But if the connection's there, then you're like, oh, are you from Utah? Yeah, oh, where at in Utah? And then you get, and somebody will say, Salt Lake, oh, you're from the city? Oh, no, I live in Sandy. I just didn't know if you would know Sandy. You know how that whole conversation goes? Well, it's the same thing when we go on presentations. You're gonna walk into somebody's house or you're gonna walk into their life and you may or may not know anything about them, okay? But you'll see something that could instantly connect you. Now, if I stay on that connection and I don't branch off and try to build more connection from that, it could just end right there. Because the fact that I'm from Utah and you're from Utah doesn't mean you want me to sell your house, okay? So just be really careful that when you're connecting with somebody that we're using other means other than just things that I recognize. It's good to start it that way, but just move on from that and try to build more rapport. I'll give you an example on that one. I had, it was probably 15 years ago. I was just new in real estate and I was going to buy a boxer dog. And I was super excited about getting a dog, this boxer. And I went to this house and they had 2 boxers. What do you think we talked about for most of the presentation? The boxers, right? And I did not get the listing. I did not go anywhere other than the boxers. We talked about their house, so we talked about it. But the only connection I had with them is I was more excited about learning about their dogs than I was about listing their property. Okay, so don't do that. That's an example of not to do. But you wanna start with a connection. Okay, make sense? The next thing we wanna do for keys to the great presentation is we wanna have some kind of value. Okay, we've gotta bring value to the conversation. That could be in information, that could be helping them solve problems. It could be anything that they need that they'll see as value. We wanna make sure that when we're presenting, whatever we're presenting is going to be not wasting their time. That's one of the biggest fears when a seller comes in is, are you going to waste my time? And if we go in there and we waste their time, that's not gonna be a really good thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so another thing on value. So let me ask you this. If I was gonna give you $50, okay, Ronnie, I'm gonna give you a $50 bill. Will you give me, in exchange for my $50 bill, will you give me $20?
Sure.
Okay, and how many times would you do that?
As many times until you stop doing it.
Okay, as many times as I stop doing it, right? Okay, what if I switched that around and I said, I'll give you $20 if you give me $50?
I'm out.
You're out. How many times would you do it? Would you do it at least once?
Maybe because I felt bad because I did it to you so many times prior.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I want you to look at is when I am giving value, they will do that all day long. If I give more value than they are paying, so the commission, what they're gonna pay, their first thought is, I'm gonna give you $50 and you're giving me $20 of value. They might do it because they're like, oh, I'm in a bind or you're my friend or something like that, but they're not gonna wanna keep doing that. If they even do it once. I would say most people wouldn't even do it. You know, you might do it if it was like, hey, we're friends, and you're like, okay, I'll help you out. But if I was just a random person saying that, you'd be like, no, right? Okay, so they're coming into this presentation thinking, I have to pay you a lot of money, I'm getting very little value. But if I can switch that in my presentation and present more value, they'll pay me whatever value it is. If I said, I'll give you $100 and you give me $50, you'd be okay with that too, I'd imagine. Okay, so anything above and beyond that, the amount that I charge doesn't really matter. So when I have a problem with my commission, when somebody says, I'm not gonna pay 3% commission, I wanna give you 2% commission. What they're really saying is, I don't see your value being worth 3%. I see your value being worth 2%. Okay, so we have to take a step back and say, I've got a couple choices here. One is I create more value so that I equal my 3%, or I'm okay with my 2% based on the value that I'm giving. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's where we want to look at is, what value am I giving? If my presentation is not worth their 30 minutes, because at the point of my presentation, I'm not asking for money. I mean, I might be asking for the transaction, but I don't get paid until when?
When it's all closed.
Once it's all closed. So I'm not gonna get paid anything until I do all of my work and it completes.
Until you're happy and everybody's at the closing table shaking hands or whatever, then I get paid, which means you're gonna be happy before I get paid.
Right, but I've been in closings that they're not happy.
Well, that might be situation, but yeah, but that's what you're leading
Yes,
to.
yes, yeah, what your point is exactly right. Okay, so, but I'm not gonna get that, so in this particular case, what is the value that I'm bringing and what are they paying me when I go to the presentation?
Well, they're not paying you anything.
Okay, they are paying me something, but not money. What is time? Okay, they're gonna spend however much time is in there. So we're exchanging my information for their time. If my information is crappy and not worth it, I'm gonna waste their time. They're gonna walk away from it saying, they're not worth it. It's not worth it. I don't wanna work with that person. But if the time that I spend is very valuable to them, they're like, oh, I'm so glad that they came out. I'm glad that we had this presentation, and then we might work together moving forward. Does that make sense? So that's where I look at it and say, when your presentation goes too long, your value starts to go down. So I don't want to see you do a presentation. Anything over 30 to 45 minutes for a presentation starts to lose value because you're now just kind of talking and being there too long. So your presentation really should be somewhere around 30 minutes max, 45 if you've got lots of questions. So I usually set aside an hour and then just say, hey, my presentation's about 20 minutes, but I'm gonna save a little bit of time for you to have questions if you have questions. Because if they have questions, I'll stay there as long as, I mean, if they're asking me questions over and over, I'm not gonna be like, yeah, the presentation just ended, so.
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah.
If they're talking to you, you kinda gotta let them go.
Yeah, but that's why I'm gonna show you this outline, because there's a difference between I'm gonna give you a presentation and I'm gonna have a conversation with you. If I'm just having a conversation and it's 45 minutes, we haven't talked about what their home's worth, but I'm answering their questions, I'm gonna say that you're not leading them through the process of a presentation. You're just over their house having a conversation. Now it's probably not valuable for you to continue staying there for, people will be nice, they're thinking their mind, it's supposed to be 30 minutes and you're here for an hour and a half. And as soon as you leave, it's like, oh man, I don't have all this stuff that I had to do and they took up all this time. That's not good for you to want to get a presentation, to get a contract signed. Make sense? Okay, so value. The next one is you need to have something that separates you from the competition. Okay, separates from the competition. Who's the competition?
Every other agent.
Every other agent. I need something to separate. If my value is the exact same as another agent, there's only two things that will separate me. Okay, so Ronnie, you and I do the exact same things to sell homes. We have the same marketing style, we have everything. What would separate the two of us in the seller's eyes?
Experience.
Okay, so same experience.
I'm better looking.
Better looking, okay, possibly.
I'm joking.
But as far as
experience would probably be, an obvious one in this situation, because you could jump right into doing that, where for me it would be
okay, so let's.
learning curve.
So you guys are two agent, brand new, okay? Experience is exact same. You're at Century 21. You have the exact same marketing strategies together. You go in and do a presentation because you guys can compete. You guys can all compete against each other, and I hope you do. It's always fun to compete against somebody you know, unless you lose. Then it's not as fun, but it's fun to do that. Okay, so now you have two agents that are the exact same experience and they have the same marketing tools. In a seller's eyes, what do you think makes the difference between I'm gonna choose you versus I'm gonna choose someone else? There's only two.
A better deal.
Better deal, okay, so you're right on the path of that. So better deal, I'm gonna say it probably a different way than that.
Now, like if somebody is with a flat fee broker.
Okay, so there we go. So one is cost, okay, and the other one is price. Okay, cost, what's gonna cost me? So if you charge 3% and she charges 2% and you're the exact same, what would they choose? 2, because you're the same. They're not going to choose something different. Now, if you say their home is worth $700,000 and she says their home is worth $800,000, which one are they gonna choose?
More. They always want more money.
They want more money, right? So these are the two factors that if you are the exact same, are going to be the deciding factors for the seller. Now, from a seller's perspective, they look at it and they go, real estate agents are all the same. You ever heard that comment? They're all the same. They do the same thing. They open houses, they put a sign in the yard, put it on the MLS, and they're the same. And I have to pay that, how much money? It's because we don't separate ourselves from the competition. Okay, so we want to have something that says, this is what most agents do. This is what most agents do. This is what I do. This is what they do. This is what I do. Okay, so I want to make a separation in this process so that they're comfortable with going with me, seeing my value, and working through that process. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I haven't finished that side of the course just yet, as far as like what kind of advice you are legally allowed to give. But part of your value that you bring is like, for example, in my experience buying the house, we didn't know the different kinds of titles there are. So God forbid my husband passes away right now, our house is gonna go to the state, because I didn't know there was like right of survivorship, all of those things. So could the value that I bring be like, I have this information that could help you in the, picking the right, or asking the right questions to your title person, or, do you see what I mean, like,
Perfect.
is that?
That's separating yourself, okay? That's also goes on to this next one, that we'll add to this one, we'll add this one while we're talking about it. But they have to feel safe, okay? They have to feel that you got their best interest in mind for them. That you need to reduce their risk. Okay, so when I say we want to separate from the competition, what we want to do is find out what's most important to them, and then we want to talk to them about what we do that helps them. There's so many things that we do, we can't sit down in a presentation and be like, here's everything that I do. It's got to fit your needs. What we need to do is find out what their needs are and then explain to them what they are going to do. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example of this separating from the competition. We had an agent in our company who was going up against another agent in another company. And Century 21 has a global presence. We have the ability to market globally, okay? He sat down with this lady to sell her home, and they talked about all the stuff that they were gonna do, and then he left and another agent came in and did a presentation. At the end, they chose the other agent. And I told this agent, and I'll tell you guys the same thing. When you get the listing or you don't get the listing, or get the client or don't get the client, always follow up with them and just ask them, hey, I always am trying to, this is how I say it, I'm always trying to learn, what was it that was a deciding factor for you to choose the other agent? I just want to find out. One, it's going to help me, because if I miss something, then I want to know that. And two, I always try to get better, and they usually give me some decent feedback on that. So I asked him to go say that. So we asked the lady, and he said, oh, that's easy. This other agent told me that they have access to a worldwide network, and they could market my property to all around the world, and I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
That's messed up.
You see the problem?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I say separate from the competition, I'm not saying that you're doing things that are different, like you have this unique marketing style that no other agent knows about. Now, if you do, then yes, use that there. But it's finding out what they're most important to them and then addressing it. Because that agent found out that that was important to him, addressed it, and she's like, yeah, that's what I want. Well, our agent could have done the exact same thing, and it wouldn't have separated. Does that make sense? So when I separate, I'm just saying, that's what they do, this is what I do. And I do that enough to create a value. Make sense? Okay, now I'm safe and reduce the risk. So what you were saying with the title, there's risks involved in selling your home. There's also unknown risks that they may or may not even think about. Okay, so if before you learned about that, there was a risk you guys were taking, you might not even knew that if he passed away, the state's taking your house and you're not going to keep the house. Okay, that's a big deal. If I sat down in front of you and said, hey, how did you take title with this property? And you told me, and I said, do you understand the risks that's involved with that? Is that going to interest you? You're going to be like, no, I don't know what those are. What are the risks? And I can tell you, these are the risks. Boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, whoa, that's a problem. And are you going to think that we're going to have a connection? Are you going to think I'm giving you value? Are you going to want to work with me because I gave you something that's protecting you? Mm-hmm. That's what we want you to do.
Yeah, not related to real estate, but just sales. Some salespeople will use this to kind of like bring up issues people didn't know they had. Mm-hmm. And then be like, hey, this is a problem that you have. You didn't know you have it, but you have it. Let me convince you of that, and then let me bring you how I can fix that issue for you.
Yeah, and I would
similar sales process.
I would be really cautious with that one, because what we want to be really careful with is that if it's really truly an issue that they're not, don't make an issue that's really not an issue the biggest issue in the world, and then be like, I'm here to solve it. Because what will happen? Well,
sorry, I didn't mean like that, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, because what I don't want to happen is when I make somebody super nervous and I'm using that as a tactic to get them to use me, as soon as they get the truth,
they're not going to trust you.
Yeah, they're not going to trust me.
Right, I was just meaning more for advising, and then again, within like what we are allowed to advise in, as far as like, I had no idea about the title thing, and I didn't know that could have been something the realtor told me had I asked.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm talking about, is like bringing up like how you were mentioning the risk. It's like, okay, these are possible risks that, and here's the people that you should contact, you know, as far as title goes, as far as negotiating goes, and here's like how I can bring value. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, I mean, like one on this that I bring up a lot is when I'm talking with a for sale by owner, or I'm talking with somebody who's not using an agent. One of the ways that I talk about safety and reducing risk is our key box. What does our key box do? That's a safety feature. Like what does it do that makes it a safety feature?
Only agents can get into the house, cause
Yeah, so
they have to have the code.
they have to have a
set up the
code.
app, and-
Yeah, so I can track whoever comes in and out of your home. So, and I also, if you may or may not know, but our key boxes, you can put a time on it, that it turns on and turns off. So one thing that, you know, I had a client that was really worried because she's like, I don't want people coming my home when I'm sleeping, and I work late at night, so I sleep in until, you know, like 11 or 12 the next day to make up the difference. I don't want people walking in my home. Well, I can turn off that key box, so if an agent just happens to show up and forgets to call me, which it happens all the time, so just prepare your sellers that that could happen. And when it does happen, that agent usually will try to throw you under the bus. They're like, I called your agent, and they said I could come over. You just so that they can save face, oh, I forgot to call this person, right? But it can protect them because I can turn it off. So if they came and tried to use the key box, it's not going to work until 11. Or let's say they say, I don't want any showings Saturday nights and all day Sunday. I can turn it off. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about reducing risk. Because as a for sale by owner, you're on call whenever somebody wants to come through your house. And I'm not going to let anybody through the home unless they have an agent or I'm going to show them. So that can reduce risk. So I want to talk about that. That might not be a concern for someone, so I might not talk about it in every presentation, but if it is a concern, I want to address it. Does that make sense? Okay, so 5, they need to trust that you can sell the home. They got to trust you. Okay, when I say they got to trust you, if you don't believe you can sell the home, they're never going to feel like you can sell the home. It's kind of a two-way thing. I have to believe, if I go into a home and I'm like, okay, I don't think I can sell this, they're going to feel that. They might not know why they don't feel comfortable with you, but they're going to be like, something's not right because you don't feel confident in yourself. So there has to be some kind of trust that 1, you need to have, and 2, they need to have too. They don't believe you can sell the home. And that's a great question you can ask them. Do you feel like I'm the right person to get your home sold? And if they say no, well, then I need to have a longer conversation. If they say yes, great, then we'll move forward. Make sense? Okay, and then the last one is we actually have to have a close. Okay, you actually have to close the conversation. You need to ask them to sign the contract. You need to ask them to let's move forward. Let's do something. Nothing can happen until we do a close. Okay, now if you close and they have objections, that's a really good thing. And a lot of people don't like objections, but I like objections because it means the sales process is not done. I can continue going. What I don't want them to say is, do you have any questions? No. Do you want to work together? Nope. Now what? Now what do I do? I'm fine with you. I'm fine with the company. I'm fine with everything. I just don't want to sell it with you. Now the sales process is done. So if they say, I got a friend in the business, well, great. Now I can keep selling. I want to save the commissions. Great. I can keep selling. I can keep going through that process. So that's where I want to make sure we actually close. If you don't close, then your presentation ends kind of like this. We've given you, you've given us a lot to think about. Thanks for coming over. That was really great. We'll call you. That's what, if you don't close, that's how it ends. And then you leave, and then do you think they call you? 70% of the chance you're not going to get that listing if you leave without getting the signed contract. Okay, now there's times where you have certain personalities where that personality is like, no, I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna take the night to think about it. And like my personality, when a salesperson says, if you don't do it now, the deal's gone. It's like trigger for me to say, okay, let's see if it's gone tomorrow.
We'll find out.
We'll see, we'll find out. And there's been some times where I've lost out on it and I'm like, well, I lost out on it. But most of the time, no, that deal's there tomorrow too. It just wants something right then. So I would always say, close and see where you go from there. Make sense? Okay, so that is the what we want to have in our presentation. Now I put this in the corner of my presentation because before I go in, I review this. So I usually will get to an appointment about 10 minutes early. I don't pull in front of their house 10 minutes early though, because I don't want it to be weird, because basically when you're going to somebody's house, they're looking, they're seeing what you're driving, they're seeing what you're doing. If you're sitting in front of their house for 10 minutes, they're like, well, what's he doing? Why is he there? So I usually will, especially in Utah, there's at least a church in every neighborhood. I usually pull into a church parking lot and I'll sit there and I'll go through my presentation and I'll look at these 6 things right here and go, okay, this is what I want to accomplish in my presentation. Every presentation that I do has to have these elements in it. If you don't get your listing or you don't get a buyer, it's because one of these things didn't happen or didn't go as planned. And you can really look at that. So before my presentation, I'll review those. When I'm done with the presentation, I'll go back and review these as well and say, okay, how was my connection? How was my value? How was my separation from the competition? How is, do I feel safe? Trust? Did I close? And I'm gonna figure out where I messed up if I didn't get the deal. Or if I did get the deal, just say, hey, what was most powerful for me? That's how you get better, reviewing what you did. So I take this and I always put it right up here on the top of my presentation, and I just review it. Okay, I need to connect, value, close, reduce risk, close, and then I just go through that. And then about 5 minutes before my appointment, now I'll go drive in front of their house and I'll go up to the door about within 5 minutes. I don't usually go late. I'm usually between 5 minutes and the time I'm supposed to be there. Okay, make sense? So that's how I route. So now we're gonna go into the presentation. The way that we're gonna go through this is I'm gonna just kind of talk to you how I do my presentation, like how I go to the house. There's not a right or wrong way. You just have to decide, like there's certain things you can decide for yourself. How do you want to approach this? And I'm just gonna tell you how I approach it, and then you can change it however you want. But there is an outline that I want you guys to at least write down and follow. Okay, so when you are going to the presentation, there's really 2 objectives that we want to do in the presentation. One is that they need to choose me. Okay, and 2 is we choose a price. Okay, those are 2 objectives that we have to get in our listing presentation. If they don't choose me, my price really doesn't matter. Does that make sense? I can tell them whatever price I want. If they don't want to work with me, it doesn't really matter. When I go to a presentation, a seller wants to know a couple of things, okay? They want to know, they want to know the price of their home. They want to know the cost. So back to these, they want to know what these 2 things are, and they want to know time frame. How long is it going to take? Okay, this is what the seller wants to know. Those 3 answers, do they have anything to do with section 1, choosing me?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
You put especially the price thing, I think that's probably the biggest one I would imagine is, what would you estimate their house at or whatever CMA you're providing to them, that's a number they don't like, that, might be a turn off, right?
Okay, so you're going down the right path when we're asking them to work with us, but if they don't want to work with us, could I give them this information?
I don't know, you're still gonna sell yourself first before you even go into that. Is that what you're-
That's where we're going with it, but what I'm saying is we got two different mindsets. A seller wants to know this. That's why they're having you to their house. They want to know what the price of their home is, what's it gonna cost me to work with an agent, and how long is it gonna take me to sell? That's what they want to know. They invited you to their house to tell me those three things. But if I go straight into these three things without having them choose me, then I give them all the information they need if they don't need to meet with me.
So wouldn't you be gaining wouldn't this be like where you would be gaining connection and rapport?
I'm going to, but
Well, how do they want to choose you? You have to give them something to want to choose you if you haven't even gone into this thing yet.
that's what we're gonna talk about. That's what I want, that's what our presentation is about this. This is what they want, but our presentation is different than what they want. Now, I'm going to give them the information. I would not want to go in a presentation, talk about a whole bunch of things, and then walk out and be like, I didn't answer any of these questions. But if I am on the phone, I haven't met them in person, and they say, well, what do you think my house is worth? And I say, well, your house is worth $600,000. And what do you charge? Well, I charge 3%. Okay, and how long does it take you to sell homes? Well, the average days on market in Salt Lake right now, 42 days. So I'll tell them 42 days. Now, I've given them all the information. Now I say, okay, now I want to come out on Tuesday at 5 o'clock and talk to you. What do you think they're going to say?
They just got all their information.
Yeah, so what's the point of us meeting? Right? Now, did I get a close? Did I get a transaction? Am I helping them?
You helped them get the information they wanted. You didn't help yourself, though.
Yeah, I helped them work with somebody else or themselves, right? So I want you to realize that they want something, but I don't want you to give it to them up front. I want you to give it to them, but I don't want you to be like, because this is what they're going to ask you, but going through a presentation with them is going to help guide this conversation so that at the end, they're choosing you, and then together, now we're working together. We're going to choose a price that works best for us because I don't want to choose the price. What if it's not right? I mean, in reality, what are we doing as agents when it comes to price?
Running the CMA, right?
Yeah, and what is that?
Well, you know.
It's a suggestion, it's a guess.
Yeah,
It's a, here's price. Let's try it,
It's
right?
anything other than your opinion, right? I mean, that's just only your opinion.
Hey, you heard my complaints
I
call
did.
on Friday.
I did.
Good job. Yes, don't get fined by that one. I like that. Okay, so the price is just a suggestion. It's like, hey, let's try this. Something happens in the market and no buyers want to buy anymore. That price is no good, even though the value says it's good. So together, we're going to work to find a price that works, because I'm not going to promise any price. Otherwise, it's going to come back on me and they're going to be like, you said that you could get it for this price and you can't. Now, I don't want to work with you because you told me a price that won't work. Well, unless you have a crystal ball that knows exactly what the buyer is going to offer, we can get pretty close, but we don't know the exact price.
Yeah, so you don't give them like an exact, you give them a range, is that correct? Do you give them a range or do you give them an exact price?
Depends on who's giving the suggestion. If they're asking me for a suggestion, I give them a range. If I'm working with them, they've chosen me, now we're working together, we're going to settle on a price.
Yes.
We're going to get an actual price. But I'm not going to come in and be like, I think I can sell your home for $625,000. I might say, right now, based on the market that I'm seeing, it's probably between, $590 and $640. Okay, that's kind of it. But once they choose me, now let's get into it and figure it out together.
So don't give them any number. You don't want to give them any number.
Well, right now, I don't want you to give them anything. I'm just telling you, right now, what we're looking at is, I'm giving you the mindset of the seller and what I want your mindset to be when you go into an appointment. This is our process. We're going to spend time on 1, then we're going to go to 2. And you're going to find that number 1 is 80% of your presentation. Number 2 is the last 20%. Okay? All right, so first we start with what I call the tap. Okay, a tap is a thank, acknowledge, and a promise. okay? So think, acknowledge, and a promise. When you go into somebody's house, do you think they're nervous or do you think they're excited to have you there? Somebody you don't know.
Probably a combination, I'm sure. Might be nervous a little bit even. I might be more nervous than you are.
Yeah, they most likely are. Why do you think they're looking through the window when you come up? You pull up and they're looking through the windows, oh, what, who is it? Like,
This guy.
does their demeanor match their voice? You know, that's what they're looking for. There's a little bit of nerves in there. So when you thank is gratitude, okay? A gratitude. Well, gratitude and fear don't exist together. When you are fearful and you go to a place of gratitude, that fear can go away, okay? Or at least calm down if you're nervous. I always start with a thank, like thanks for having me out. Thank you for your time today. I want to give them something that's on gratitude. This does two things for me, okay? One, it helps me, because if I'm a little bit nervous, which I don't know if you guys ever get nervous when you go and talk to somebody you don't know, but for me, it's sometimes nerve-wracking to just like going up to the house, I'm going to do a presentation and I sure hope it works out good. I'm a little bit nervous. So thanking, going to gratitude and just doing that helps me to calm down a little bit, but it helps them to calm down a little bit, okay? Everybody wants to be acknowledged. You can acknowledge whatever you want. Acknowledge their time, acknowledge their home, whatever you want to acknowledge. They want to be appreciated. They feel better that way. So in the first of the presentation, I'm going to be thanks, then I'm going to acknowledge them, and then I'm going to promise them something. What I usually do is I promise them, you know, it's not going to be a waste of your time. I'm going to promise you that I'm going to get you some of the best information possible. So at the first of the presentation, I'm actually saying, so this is how it would go. It would be like, hey, thanks again for having me out. I know your time is valuable, and I promise you that the time we spend tonight will be some of the most valuable things we can talk about real estate. Sound good to you? Does that make sense? So it's super fast, and it's just, it kind of catches somebody right at the very beginning that says, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. And you can say, I acknowledge that you had a lot of agents that have been calling you and that you chose to meet with me, and I promise you that I won't disappoint you, okay? I acknowledge the time you're taking out of your day to sit down with me, and I promise you that I won't waste any of your time today. Like, you're giving them something so they feel good about you. We're trying to connect with them. Does that make sense? Okay, so first step is I'm going to thank, acknowledge, and promise, okay? The second step is what I call a game plan. Okay, so this is key to actually giving a presentation and not just having a conversation. If you don't give them an outline or a game plan of what you're going to talk about, it's going to just kind of be a natural conversation. And when you're doing a natural conversation, the chances of you leading them to a successful close drops dramatically. You actually are having a presentation. So some people don't like the fact that we're creating a scripted presentation. But the reality is when you have a scripted presentation, you can say the same things over and over and get the same type of results that you're looking for. You can craft your presentation to get the results you want, okay? They don't know that you give the exact same presentation. To them, it's their first presentation. And the better you are at your presentation, the less rigid and robotic it sounds. But at least you have a direction for that. Otherwise, you're not going to lead them through it because they're going to lead you back to, this is what I want to know, now get out of my house, kind of a feel, where this is that. Okay, so I'm going to, before we talk about the game plan, I'm going to give you how I get into this process. I park in the driveway, I'll go up to the door. When I get to the door, I'll knock on the door. I never stand right up at the door. I always step back. If there's a step down, I always step down one, so I'm trying to be a little bit lower than them, because for me, I'm a little bit taller, so if I'm right at the door, when they come out, that's intimidating. I don't want to be intimidated. So I'm either going to back up on a longer porch, or I'm going to drop down one step when they come in. That creates a little bit of safety buffer where I'm new, they're new to me. I don't want to freak them out. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't ever really knock really hard. That will drop connection for somebody who's like, whoa, why are they knocking on the door? Okay, so there's little things like that. You just have to decide for yourself how you want to approach it. There is research that says if you stand straight on somebody, it's more challenging. Like, I'm going to challenge you, versus if I step 1 foot back, I'm not as threatening. So for us guys, it might be good for us to turn this way. You guys can decide how you want to approach the doors. But for guys, don't be intimidating.
Girls have the advantage on that one, in my opinion.
Well, they can be intimidating too. So you just have to decide what.
Just less threatening.
Honestly, what I would do is go up to a door and see what you naturally do, because naturally your safety might be to turn. You might not be like, I'm going to be like, if I walked straight up to you and I was talking to you and I was just like this straight on and you were straight, that would probably make me really uncomfortable. It may make you uncomfortable, it may not. Some cultures that they like to talk close. Like, if you start talking to me and we're like this close, this is awkward for me.
Yeah,
So-
Brazil's like that.
Did they talk close?
Yeah, there's no personal space in Brazil.
Yeah. So that might be okay if somebody came up to you and was talking to you close, that could, you might feel okay with that. Where for me, if you came up to me that close, I would probably back up like this to give myself the space that I needed.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, this is kind of like a little bit different, but
Mhm.
something that I've kind of thought about for a while. Is there like, or have you ever had this like felt just unsafe? Because I know you said you've done a lot of like door to door things. Like, has there ever been times where you just felt like, okay, I gotta get out of here, or like this person's weird, or things like that?
I'm sure.
yes, it happens a lot. So the one thing I would always suggest if you ever go door knocking, somebody needs to know that you're going door knocking, give you that buffer, or go with somebody. And as agents, I don't think you need to go like, hey, we're together and we're knocking on the door. But a lot of the agents will go, I'll go with some agents, they'll do that side of the street and I'll do this side of the street, and we'll just know where everybody is. That gives it. But if you ever feel really unsafe, I would just leave. Okay? And there's been times, in fact, I had one that they really made me uncomfortable, and I was in the presentation and I just closed up the presentation and left and got back, and the person called the office and was like, your agent's so rude. They walked out, and I just told them, I said, I did not feel comfortable in this situation, and I just left. So you have to decide for you. There's techniques like, just safety techniques when you're walking through a house. I don't want to lead them through a house. I don't want them behind me. I like to follow them. I don't go into rooms that it's just like, oh, I'll go into the doorway of a room and I'll see the room, but I'm not gonna go into the room where they can shut the door, stuff like that. So there's techniques that you just have to just kind of look at, but the safest thing is just to know that you have somebody who knows where you're at.
I was just gonna share a story. So with my husband during summer sales, there was a few girls on the team, and that has happened too. Because I was gonna say like yeah, for girls we're not as intimidating, especially if you're short. And there was like a really short, like tiny girl. She was like a high school graduate, 18, 19, knocking doors. And when you're a rookie, they put you in rough neighborhoods because those are the easier neighborhoods until you find your demographics. There's been stories of, there's been 3 different girls that have, knocked on the door and the guy will start flirting with them. Some of them will play into it because you flirt to convert or whatever. They'll like use that in their advantage. But the few times that they have done that with, I think it was with Sunrun, so solar, they would come into the house, do the same thing that you're saying where they'll let the other person lead, all of that. But I know it's like a missionary rule, but if you're going into a house, make sure there's both, husband and wife. Don't go in with just the husband. Cause what saved one of the girls was the wife got there, cause the guy, he was letting her into the house and he was getting a little too personal and physical, like trying to literally grab her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's literally married, has kids, and you would think like, oh, like I don't have to worry, he's married, like he's not gonna do this. He was doing this, and if it wasn't for
Yeah.
the wife walking in, he wouldn't have let her go. So it's
Yeah.
like, for girls at least with the summer sales stories that I hear, just make sure both the wife and the husband or both partners are at home, and again, make sure everybody knows where you are. You have pepper spray and a knife pocket or something with you, so
Yeah.
if you ever need to run or defend yourself, you're able to. Just have like an escape plan.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect, you know, and in real estate, there's two times that you have to really be just on guard. One is when you're going into somebody else's house, and the other was when a random person calls and says, will you show me the house? Okay, so those are the two times where you wanna just be a little extra cautious. If somebody calls you up and says, hey, I'm interested in buying this house, and you're like, yeah, I'll come on out and show you, which, you know, that's what we would do. That's one that I would just be a little more cautious with and verify. And if somebody has a problem with you verifying who they are, then you probably shouldn't go meet them. You know, some of the buyers, I will require them to come into the office before I'll even go show them homes. You just have to decide that. As far as the listing is concerned, you know, you're going into their home, just realize that you are putting yourself into some kind of a risk. You just need to mitigate that as best as you can. So those are the two times in real estate where you really have to be like on guard, okay? So I'll go up, I'll do the door, I'll go in the door. The first thing I do when I get into the door, I like to look at the house, right, first thing. So I'll go into the kitchen. I like to sit in the kitchen if possible. And the reason I don't go into the living room is some people have these couches that when you sit on the couch, it like sucks you into the couch. That's a really hard presentation when you're like leaning back really far or so I always try to do the presentation in the kitchen. Sometimes you go in the kitchen and there's just no place to sit and it's just hard, so you might have to do it in the living room. But I try to do it in the living room or in the kitchen. So I'll usually go into the kitchen, I'll put my stuff down, and then I'll say, hey, I'd like to go take a look at the home. Okay, there's 3 ways you can look at a home, and there's advantages to each of them, and so you can decide which one you want. Okay, one method is I'm going to tell them, here, take a look at my stuff. I'm going to look at your house in the eyes of a buyer, and I'm gonna run through the house really quick. I don't want you coming with me. I just wanna look at it and see what a buyer's gonna see, since they're not gonna have you here either, and then I'll ask you questions about it, okay? The advantage to that is that, one, you go through the house very quickly. They're not telling you every single story, and then you come back. I don't necessarily like that idea because for me, I use it as a time to build my connection and run my rapport. So then the next method is that I go through the house with them, but I'm going to not lead them, I'm going to lead the discussions. I'm gonna go, okay, and I'm gonna kind of move quicker through the property, and I can build my rapport and I can see the property. If I just follow them through the house, that tour is going to be a 45-minute tour. They're gonna tell you every single story, every single thing that you've never needed to know about this property that you're personally not buying, okay? Which is fine. There's like a real fine line of letting them talk about their house and express what they're selling something that is part of them. And so to be like, yeah, not a big deal, not a big deal. At the end, one of them's gonna be like, I just don't think I want them to sell my home because they don't feel the same way I do about my home. So there's this fine line between, I want to see their home and I want to know about their home, but I don't want to know about everything about their home. I don't need to know that they had this many kids and this is what they did here. That doesn't matter when selling a home, but it does matter in connecting with them. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can either have them show you the home, which I think is the longest method, or I can go through the home and ask questions and keep the process moving. That's what I like doing. Or you could have them sit at the table and look at your marketing material while you walk through the home. That's the fastest way to go through it. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I've walked through the home. I've done this, because I did that at the porch. I said that at the porch. But when I come back to the kitchen, I actually will restart again, and I'll do this again. And the reason for that is because this is a trigger for me that says I am starting a presentation. So I'll sit down and like, hey, once again, thanks again for having me over. Your home was really beautiful. And, you know, we'll see. I promise you we'll get some information that will help get your home sold tonight. Now I've got back into this mode. Now I'm gonna go into the game plan. Now if I don't do a game plan or an outline for them, then they're gonna start asking me questions. Well, what do you think this house is worth? What do you think, you know, what do you charge? All of that. I don't wanna go there, because what do I wanna go? I want them to choose me. So I'm gonna give them a game plan. Now I'm gonna read this to you, and I want you to, it might not make sense, but think about it, because it does make sense. This is what a presentation is in a nutshell. It says, first I'm going to tell them what I'm going to tell them, then I'm going to tell them, and then I'm going to tell them what I told them. Does that make sense? Okay, that's my whole presentation in a nutshell. First I'm going to tell them everything that we're going to talk about. Then I'm going to talk about it. And then I'm going to rehash and tell them what I told them. That's how my presentation goes. So right here is where I'm going to tell them what I'm going to tell them. So I'm going to give them an outline of what it is, okay? That outline is, okay, number one is needs and wants. Okay, I'm gonna ask them about what you need and what you want. I wanna dig deep. I wanna know what they're trying to do. When somebody says, you know, why are you selling your home? Well, I just wanna sell my home. Well, nobody just sells homes because they wanna sell homes unless you're real estate agents. That's why we sell homes. A person selling their home has a real reason. They might not tell you yet, but this is where I want to discover that. So I'm gonna tell them, I wanna know their needs and wants. Number two, I wanna know their expectations. I'm gonna talk about the market. And I'm gonna talk about exposing their property to buyers. Okay, number three, I'm gonna talk about market and price. And that's where I do the CMA and my strategies to sell your home. And then number four, I'm gonna sign the contract. Okay? Okay, that's my outline. That's the whole presentation that we're gonna do. Okay? I'm gonna do needs and wants, expectations, market and price with my CMA, and then I'm gonna have you sign the contract. Okay? That's what I'm gonna tell them straight up, this is where I'm going. I'm not gonna break off and say, like this is where a lot of people mess up. They say, we're gonna talk about what your needs and wants are, and then the seller says, oh, well, I can tell you what I need. What I wanna do is go through this outline with them. So what I'm gonna say is, hey, let me give you a game plan of what we're gonna cover tonight. First, we're gonna talk about your needs and wants. Then we'll talk about your expectations, market, exposure of your property. Then we'll talk about the market and the price and kind of find out what your value is worth. And last, if everything feels good and you feel comfortable about working with me, I'm gonna ask you to sign some paperwork. Does that sound good to you? Is basically how I'm gonna present it. I'm just telling you, this is how I wanted this presentation to unfold tonight. And if I'm giving them that, now they're more in the mood of saying, I'm gonna hear a presentation versus I'm just gonna have a conversation. Now, do you think they wanna hear a presentation? Okay, you're saying no. Why do they not wanna hear a presentation?
They kind of have a bad rap.
Okay,
They're like, the agent does all the talking, so.
okay, I like that. And I'm gonna show you how we're not going to do all the talking in our presentation.
Great.
Okay, so we'll go into that, because right now, all I'm doing is saying, this is the things we're gonna talk about. I wanna give them an outline of what we're gonna talk about so that we stay on track. And the thing with this one is I'll say, we'll sign the contract. Okay, other than these things, is there anything else that you wanna talk about while I'm here tonight? What else do you think they would wanna talk about?
Time frame.
Okay, time frame. Okay, perfect, time frame. And then what I do is I'll just take my notebook and I'll write it down. Okay, time frame. That's something we want to make sure we talk about. Anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Cost. Commission?
Commission, okay? Commission, cost, we'll definitely talk about that. Okay, anything else we wanna talk about tonight?
How much we could profit from the home?
Okay, so the price and what we can net from it, we'll definitely talk about that in the marketing and pricing section. Perfect, anything else we wanna talk about? Okay, now I have my list for my presentation. I know what they wanna talk about, I know what I wanna talk about. Okay, now I can move forward with that. Does that make sense? Okay, so now if I go back to my saying, I'm gonna tell them what I'm gonna talk about. Now what am I gonna do? I'm gonna tell them, okay? So now I'm gonna go into number 3 of this plan. And this is what you were talking about. I'm gonna ask questions. Okay, selling is not telling. I cannot sell somebody if I'm gonna just keep telling them things. I have to ask them questions. They have to discover it themselves. This presentation is not about me telling you things. It's about you helping me see what you need and we getting solutions for that. Okay, so I'm gonna ask questions. So then what questions do I need to ask? What's my first question?
Why are you selling the home?
Okay, and it's connected to this, right? Okay, so the first questions right here have to go with your needs and wants. Ultimately, what are you trying to do to accomplish your selling your home? Where are you moving to? You know, and then I want you to dig deeper in there. I want you to get more into that. They say, I'm moving to St. George. Oh, St. George, that's awesome. What's taking you to St. George? Where are you moving to St. George? What, do you have friends in St. George? Are you excited about moving to St. George? Like, what is this about for you? Like, why are we doing this is what I'm ultimately asking in my head, but I want them to express to me what's important to them. Like, why are we even doing this? I want to know that, and I can only do that by asking questions over and over. I'm going to dig deeper. What are you doing with this? And I do that with you guys with real estate. What are you, why did you get in real estate, right? You and I talked about this. We went a little bit deeper and says, great, what is it about this? You know, oh, I want to make money. Great. What is it about the money that you want to do? What is it about this? What is it about this? And I'm digging deeper into that conversation. They're telling me, I'm just asking the questions. Does that make sense? Now, I don't want to move on from this until I know exactly what they're doing. Now, the key to this is if somebody says, I'm moving to St. George, do I know all of this? No. And we have a tendency as agents that we hear one thing and then we just leave it at that. And we're like, yeah, they want to move. That's great. Well, that's not really, they're not going to give you their real reason until you talk to them longer about it and dig deeper and find out what, like, yeah, you're moving. That's great. Are you excited about moving? Is there, like, some of the questions that I like to ask is, you know, do you absolutely have to sell this home? You know, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish by selling this home? What will selling this home do for you and your family? Where are you moving to next? When would you like to be in your new home? What would you do if your home didn't sell or you didn't get the right price? I want to know those questions and I want them to tell me about it. Yeah.
So is this a time where, like, where you walk through the house and you're looking at it, or you're talking to them that you would want to get any kind of like information about, like flooding or, like roofs that need to be repaired, things like that, or do you do that at a later time?
Yeah, seller disclosure stuff, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So
Later on down the line.
yes, and yes. Okay, yes, for sure, when we get to the seller's disclosures. When I'm walking through the house, so how I'll present that, so to get those questions, if there's anything that jumps out at me that you want to know whether you should fix or not, let me know. Because they'll ask me, should I paint this? Should I fix this? There's a hole in the wall here. And I'm going to give them advice on should I fix that or not. And what I always say is if it's something a buyer's going to look at and say, oh, that's a problem, then we want to get it fixed. You know, like it's like these tiles, right? If I ever have a water leak, you see a brown spot on it, right? Well, if that leak was 10 years ago, but they never fixed it on the wall, well, I probably want them to fix it because the buyer's gonna come in and be like, oh, look, they have a leak. That probably was last week. Like they're gonna think that. Or you have a hole in the wall, somebody has a child that hit the wall with something, fisting through the wall, there's a hole in the wall, and they're like, should I fix that? Well, a buyer's gonna look at it and say, there's a hole in the wall, that means this house is, like, people were really rough on the house, that means other things could be broken, that hole is worth $10,000 off the price for me. When you could fix it for, less than $200, right? Well, I might have them fix that because I don't want the buyer to say, I'm gonna drop the price by $10,000 because there's a hole in the wall.
Don't give them a reason to use to try to.
So that's where I would do it through my walkthrough. I would ask certain questions on that. But what I don't want to get into is, really deep into what's going on. Like, oh, there was a leak here. I don't need to know the whole story about the leak. I can just say, do I fix it or do I not fix it? The answer is yes, great. Then I write it down and I'm like, okay, here's some things that we probably should fix. But they're gonna always ask, should I paint the home? The carpet's really bad. Should I change the carpet? Everyone has a different opinion on that, on what you should or shouldn't do. Painting the home makes it smell better, it makes it look better. But is it necessary? Depends on the market. If the market's like 2020, 2021, and 2022, I would say absolutely not, don't do anything. They're gonna come in and they're gonna buy your home as is and don't do anything. But if we're back in 2008, 9, 10, and 11, where you had to separate your house from the other 75 homes that were available that looked just like your home, you wanted your home to be pristine. Carpet, I've had sellers say, well, this carpet is horrible, it's really bad. Should we change it? Well, I've seen sellers change the carpet. The buyer comes in and they have an allergy and they rip out all the carpet. In fact, I saw one, it was interesting. The seller redid the kitchen, like all brand new cabinets. And the buyer came in and within 2 weeks, all those cabinets were in the road and they put another set of brand new cabinets in. So there's this fine line of, I'm just gonna sell the home as is and this will be more of a profit for me, okay? So, and as you walk through homes, you'll see, you'll be like, yeah, if a buyer sees this, they're gonna offer you less money and it's gonna cost you $200 to fix that, they're gonna drop your price by 10,000. Yeah, I might wanna fix that.
You gotta be a little careful, do you have to be a little careful though, if you like advise, like, oh, maybe you should do this or that, and they do it, and then the house doesn't sell? Like, is that,
Well, I
does
wouldn't,
that get them, you know what I mean, I'd just be careful on like what I would.
yeah, so yes, but the things that I'm going to suggest they fix are things that if they fixed it, they wouldn't be mad that they haven't fixed now.
Right.
Like I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, this, well, that would be a bad example because I said I wouldn't have them change the paint because they like the paint. There was,
There's maybe something they wouldn't have changed like otherwise,
Yeah.
like you suggested. Or
yeah, and you have to be really careful because if you tell them to do something and they do it and your home doesn't sell because of it, they might not be happy with you.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Just
be
saying,
careful.
you could want to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, I try not to get them, honestly, I would rather them not do anything, because here's the challenge when you have them fix something. Now I'm gonna close them, and what are they gonna say? I need them to fix something.
Yeah, you gotta fix the stuff before you can.
Yeah, they're gonna fix it. Now, what happens when somebody says, I wanna sell my home, and then they don't list with you right at the time, but they're going to list with you, then they live their life and they start getting excited about selling their home. And what are they doing while they're getting excited about selling their home? They're looking at other homes, so they're talking to everybody they know about how they're gonna sell their home. And the next thing you know, another agent has swooped in and they listed their home because now they're closer friends. Does that make sense? So I had a situation, I'm telling you all of these bad stories. I've taken a lot of listings, but I'm just giving you some examples of the ones I don't take. But I had a listing where I went out and it was on a Friday night, Friday afternoon that I went to the listing. We had a great conversation. There was a few things they wanted to fix. I said, we're gonna go through the weekend and we'll call you on Monday to list the property. And everything was good and they were set. They chose me, we chose the price. I just didn't have them sign the contract. They didn't sign the contract and they were gonna sign it on Monday. Well, over the weekend, they went to dinner on Sunday with some friends. And that friend happened to be a real estate agent. And what do you think that friend decided to tell him to do? Yeah, so guess who I got a call from on Monday morning?
You call your potential client saying I'm going with another agent.
No, I wish it was my potential client. It was the other agent who called me and said, just so you know, I signed a contract with this client, so don't contact him.
What a dick.
But were they really though?
No, I mean.
I mean, that's the reality of it is they went to dinner with a friend who was a real estate agent. If I went to dinner, if somebody came to me and we went to dinner and they said, I'm listing my home this next week and I'm an agent, I'm who I am, would I be like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad you got somebody else to work with. No, I'd be like, did you sign a contract with them? No. Well, why are you not working with me?
Why didn't the potential client just call them back? Be like, sorry, we went with another agent. Why did the dick move with the other agent? Calling you like, hey, I got it. But don't call
Because she
me.
knew who I was. We were friends.
Oh, okay.
So she wanted to rub it in my face.
Oh. Cool.
I didn't think of it that way. I looked at it more of like, that was my mistake of not getting it signed on Friday. But I run the risk even if I don't sign it. So if I'm saying gonna fix it, I'm gonna take the next 2 weeks to fix the home. In those 2 weeks, you're gonna lose that listing because they're gonna talk to somebody, because they're going to talk about selling their home. Once they've decided they're gonna sell their home, they're excited about it. So they're gonna talk about it. They're not gonna be like, yeah, we're gonna sell our home. I'm not gonna tell anybody yet. No, they're telling everybody, which is awesome. If you have it signed, it's awesome because they're telling all their friends, their neighbors, their neighborhood. Somebody in the neighborhood's like, hey, I've got a kid that wants to move back in the neighborhood. Let me reach out to them. It's perfect for selling your home if you have a contract signed. If you don't have a contract signed, it's not perfect, okay? So I'm gonna ask questions about that. So now I've asked questions about this. Now where am I gonna go next? My expectations. Now, this is where you could get lost in, I'm going to tell you versus I'm going to ask questions because I'm gonna say, this is what I do. Well, for me, what I do is I ask them questions. What's most important to you about an agent that you choose to sell your home? What do you expect from your agent and company to do to sell your home? Is there any special marketing strategies that are important to you? Is there any kind of marketing that you don't want me to do? These are questions that I'm gonna start digging deeper into. And I wanna know, what are their expectations? Well, in my expectations in marketing, this is where I'm gonna start separating myself. I'm gonna start bringing value. I'm gonna tell them, this is what I have, this is what we do. You know, is this important to you? Okay? If a seller says, I want you to do an open house, do you want you to do an open house? Do you do open houses? Okay, so if I was a seller, Ronnie, and I said, do you do open houses?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you see any problem with what he said? Okay, what's the problem you see?
Well, as the seller, you may not want to do open houses.
Perfect, okay, so
You're not saying that I do them no matter what. They asked you and you're just saying, your thought is they're asking if you do because they want you to. So you may accidentally answer that question the wrong way. You know what I'm saying?
and if you answer it the wrong way, are they gonna tell you that you answered it the wrong way?
No, but
And that's where the problem is
it's
if,
how do you know what they mean by that question?
exactly, so I want you to avoid questions that can paint you into a corner that you don't know whether or not they want it or not. So what would be a good approach if I said that same to you? What would you say now that you don't want to, you don't know whether I want them or I don't want them? So I'm gonna say, Ronnie, do you do open houses?
I certainly can if that's something you're interested in.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so now I'm not painting it into it. Another way that I would approach it is that something that's important to you? Because if they say, no, I actually really don't want that, now I'm not gonna present that I do it. I'm gonna be like, yeah, no, I'm fine with not doing it. If they're like, no, actually, I really want you to do an open house. Well, now I'm gonna present it as, if I do open houses, if I'm not an agent who does certain things, I'm not going to say, yes, I'm gonna do that. So does that make sense? So when I'm working through this expectations in marketing, what I'm talking about is two types of expectations. Okay, the seller's expectations of me and my expectations of the seller. Okay, so we know what the seller's expectations are, right? What are their expectations for us? Or what's some of them? What could a seller's expectations be?
So they can trust you to sell the house in something that.
Okay, sell the house in a timely manner, Okay.
Marketing.
marketing. Okay, I don't want you to show my home on Sundays, or I want no showings after 6 p.m., or I work nights so nobody comes in the morning. I need 24-hour notice. These are all expectations I want to learn about from them. Most frustration happens in any conversation when the expectations you have of the person are not met. And the problem is most expectations are never expressed outwardly. We think they should just assume that. They should just think that, because that's the way I think. I think you should think how I think. So you're breaking my expectations of what we've decided. Now I'm frustrated. That happens in relationships all the time. You got an expectation you didn't meet that you didn't even know was an expectation you should have met. Same thing with the seller. Okay? So they can have all of these expectations. What do you expect? What is in regards to showings, in regards to open houses, I think that's important. So you give the expectations. Now, I have expectations as a seller. As you guys as seller's agents, you guys should have expectations. What should those look like? What is your expectation? What are some expectations you would have on a seller?
You'd be able to communicate with them on a timely manner too. Like if I need to get in contact for showing, need to know that you're gonna be able to answer.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Perfect. Okay, so it's now you're saying, look, I can't sell your home if I can't get a hold of you, and I can't show it if I can't get a hold of you. Okay? So that's the expectation. One of my expectations is that you have to be able to show your house. If I have somebody come to me and say, yeah, I want you to sell my house, but I don't want you to show it, well, now I have to really look at it and say, is that something I can do? Can I sell your house without showing your house? Well, it makes things difficult. If they come and they say, I don't want you to show the house Monday through Friday because I work and I won't show it on Sunday, but on Saturday, you can show it from 1 to 2 on Saturdays on the 3rd Saturday of the month. Well, now I might not take that listing.
Yeah, it's minimizing your abilities.
Yeah, but I have to give them my expectation. Otherwise, what happens is I call up and I say, hey, we got a showing today. And if you price it right, in today's market, you price it right, the first 2 days, they could be practically out of their house for those 2 days because you could be showing their home nonstop. Especially if it's priced right and it's in a good area.
So there's a level of them meeting your expectations, or else you don't want to waste your time with a listing, right?
Call
Yeah.
find a lead.
I want to make sure that, so that's why it's really important for this conversation to where it's finding out what they're expecting of me and I'm going to expect this of them. When somebody says, so one expectation that sellers like that I like to clarify for me, because my expectations is a little opposite of theirs, they want to be communicated with all the time. So when this home gets shown, they want to be communicated with, which I agree with. However, I also have other things I want to do. So my expectation is I'm going to call you once a week and give you the feedback. I'm going to give you the feedback for what's going on. And if they're like, well, I want to know the feedback right after the showing. A lot of times I can't get a hold of the agent right after the showing. They're still showing houses. A lot of times if they're not going to buy your home, they're not going to give me feedback anyway. So I want to see if I can weed that out and then present something good to them. So I'll set that. So I look at this as you need to create what we just call standards, okay? You create your own standards. Your standards of how you do business. And if it doesn't fit somebody else's business model, you might not want to do business with them. You don't have to take every single listing that comes out there. And the more you know what your personal standards are, the better it's going to be. And that's where, one of my expectations is that they treat me well. I don't want them calling me up on the phone and yelling at me because things that are not in my control, they're getting mad at me with. So I'm going to have that conversation with them. That's not okay for you to talk to me that way. And if I lose business because of it, if it's part of my standards, I'm okay with that. But somebody else, like we had one agent where they had a listing and this guy was he was a piece of work. He was not very nice. And it was an agent she was the sweetest lady ever. And every time she got on the phone with him, she'd be in tears. And it was like, this is not okay. And so what we ended up doing, we had another guy in the office who was just as mean of a guy. And so she teamed up with him, and he took over the listing. They worked fine together because they just biggered back and forth, and they were just fine. And then she got paid in the end because she was part of it, but we brought somebody else in there. So it's not that you're like, I'm not going to work with you, but you can look for a solution that says, I don't want to work with you. I'm going to have somebody else work with me, and it goes back to, if you got a client that's making you really uncomfortable, bring somebody else in with you so you don't have to have that experience. The more business you have, like if I have 5 clients and one is a jerk and I don't want to work with them, I can fire them. When you have one client and they're a jerk and you want to get paid, you can't fire them. You still want to get paid. So that's the advantage of getting more business as you go through. So this for the expectations. And when I say marketing, I'm talking about my action plan, things that I'm going to do, like how I'm going to get their home sold. And there's 2 sets that I want you to think about. Okay, one is marketing that you can buy. Okay, these are like MLS, photos, websites, things that help the client sell their home that you are paying money to do. Like those are things that you can do it, I can do it, the agent at another company, we can all buy the same sources. Like the MLS, is some other agent's MLS better than my MLS? Okay, it's the exact same. However, when I talk about it, I'm going to talk about my MLS is better than your MLS. Because I'm going to present it as this is the advantage of the MLS. Can you mess up with the MLS? Yeah, in fact, we had a lawsuit that just got settled on Friday, and it cost us $25,000 for one mess up on the MLS. Right? Can mess up all the time. They're always messing up. So you have to be really careful. So when I'm talking to them, I'm like, one of the strategies that I use is I make sure that all the information is correct. Now, is that something that everyone should do? Yes, they all should do that. Do they all do that? No.
This last brokerage I was at, I caught 2 different MLS listings that they had the wrong address, the wrong info, 2 different times. Probably saved them a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, that's what happens. And there's a lot of information on there. But my favorite is doing expireds in. Hey, how are you? My favorite is doing expireds in March, April, and May, because if you look at the expired and it has snow in the picture, then it's an easy one to be like, well, obviously your agent's not really paying attention because your home doesn't have snow in it right now and there's snow in the pictures, right? And you can get that, but there's a lot of mess ups. In fact, one that I took the expired listing and was able to get it sold. The mess up the agent had is this was on 134th and 7th West in Riverton, which is a nice little farm area, like nice older houses. They put 7th East on there, which is down closer to where the prison used to be. And it was like an industrial park area, where like big buildings and stuff were there. And so when people pull it up on the MLS, they're like, I don't want to live in the 7th East, I want to live on 7th West. Well, the house was on 7th West, but the agent put East instead of West, and it was there for 6 months. And then expired, and they're like, I don't know why it didn't sell. And then I looked at it and go, well, I can tell you why it didn't sell. Everybody thinks they're buying this industrial park. Then we listed it, put the right address on it, changed it from a E to a W, and it sold. That happens all the time, which is really frustrating for us as agents, because us as agents are really trying, like, there's some really bad agents and there's some really great agents. And the bad agents speak louder than the great agents. So that's why we're like second to last trusted. You got attorneys, and then we flip-flop between used car salesmen and real estate agents. Whether we're least trusted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so. Okay, so in that section, we're going over the listing presentation. Are you here for the activities management one? Okay, we'll start that one in like 20 minutes, but we'll just finish the listing presentation. Okay, so in the listing presentation, we're at expectations, marketing, exposure. That's everything that I want to do to sell the property. This is where I have to separate myself from the competition. If I'm not asking them questions through this process, I will never discover, like the agent I was telling you about, that it was important for them to have international marketing, which we do, but they didn't talk about it because that wasn't something they asked the question. So I want to ask them tons of questions. Okay, one question I really like to ask them is, I'll talk about a couple of things of value for me. So I'll create this value question section. So this is what I call my value close. Okay, and starts out with, are you aware of, and then fill in blank. Okay, are you aware of the MLS? Are you aware of how I communicate with people? Like, this is how I get into separating myself from the competition. I'm going to say, are you aware of this? Now, when I ask a question, I'll only ask questions that I am okay with whatever answer they give me, or that I know what answer they're going to give me. If I'm not okay with an answer, I don't want to ask the question. Does that make sense? When I'm asking questions, I either don't care what the answer is, or I know what they're going to say. Does that make sense? So in here, are you aware of this? And I say, are you aware of how I communicate with my clients? They say yes, that's okay. If they say no, that's okay too. I'm okay with either one of those. Does that make sense? Number two, I'm going to say, what do you know about this? Okay? Are you aware of how I communicate? Okay? And if they say yes, I might ask the question, what do you know about this? Okay? Let's use another example. Are you aware of the MLS? Yes, I know what the MLS is. Great. What do you know about the MLS? Now I want them to tell me what they know. Why am I asking them what they know?
Where your starting point is to how much you need to explain to them.
Yeah, I'm going to have a starting point where I can say, okay, this is what we know so far. Now I can build on that. And if we don't know anything, I can start from that point. Okay, so what do you know about it? Okay, the next thing is I'm going to say, may I share a little bit more, a little bit about that with you. Okay, now I'm asking permission if I can share a little bit more about it with you. Now this is where I can start separating myself. Okay, so are you aware of how I communicate with my agents? No, I'm not aware of how you communicate. May I share a little bit of how I communicate with my clients? What are you hoping they're going to say there? If they say no, it's going to be a problem. So this is one of those questions where I kind of know what they're going to say. I'm kind of giving them an opportunity to say, yeah, I'd like to know more about that. If they say no to that, then I might go straight to my close and say, well, it sounds like you might be ready to work together. If they say no, then I'm like, great, can I share a little bit more about that with you then? Does that make sense? Okay, maybe share a little bit about that. Okay, now this is the key to a value close. The next question is, do you see value in that? Okay, I want to know if they see anything value in that. If they say, no, that's fine, that's not a big deal, then I might want to choose something else that I'm going to present. But may I share with you how I communicate with my clients? Yeah, sure, great. This is how I communicate with my clients. Every week on Monday, I'll give you a call and we'll talk about 3 things when I call you. Okay, first I'm going to talk about what's happened the last week that I've been working with your home. Second thing we're going to talk about is any feedback that's happened from the showings. And the third thing we're going to talk about is what we're going to do this next week. Okay? Do you see value in having that kind of a conversation on a weekly basis? Great. Okay, that's what I want to hear. I want to say, yeah, I see value in that. Now this is where we sometimes can get off. You say, what value do you see? Okay? We have an assumption that the value they think is the same value that we think. And we need to make sure we don't do that. They might see some other value that I didn't think about that's important to them. I wanna know why it's important to them. Okay? If I tell you something, you might be okay with it, but if they tell themselves something, they're gonna accept it. So if they say to themselves, yeah, I see value in that, that's something I think, and this is the value that I see. That's them telling you their opinion about what you're doing. They're selling themselves on you, not you. You don't have to sell them on this system. They have to sell themselves on this system. So I say, do you see value in that? Yeah, I see value. What value do you see? And then you follow that one up, is that something you want me to do? Okay, so is that something you want me to do? So the way this looks is, if I talk about my communication, are you aware of how I communicate with my clients? No, I'm not. No, I don't really know. I would imagine you just call them. Yeah, may I share a little bit about that with you? Okay, I'm gonna share that with them. I'm gonna say, hey, these are the things I do. I go through my spiel of, these are the 3 things I talk about every single week. Do you see value in that? Yes, I see value in that. What value do you see? Then they tell me the value they see, and then I lock them down. Great, you see value in that. Is that something you want me to do? Yes. Great, now we go on to the next one. Okay, and I wanna do at least 3 or 4, or until they get to the point where they choose me. Because they're convinced, they're saying, I see value in that. Okay, you said, I see value, I see value, I see value, I see value, you wanna work with me? And if they say no, well, then let's get some more value. I'm gonna keep building value until they say, yeah, I see value in that. That's where I'm trying to build this. Value for here. That makes sense? Okay, so I'm gonna build that value, and then we'll move on from there. So that's the questions. Number 4, we'll go specifically into a plan of action. Okay, so now they've chosen me, we go into a plan of action. And in that plan of action, we're going to go, actually, that's what this is, sorry. This is the questions for these, then the value closes in the plan of action. Does that make sense? Did I confuse you? We good? Okay, and then number 5, we're gonna go into the market. Okay, and what I do with the market is I'll learn a little bit about my global market, then the national, then the local, and then that leads to my CMA. Why would I talk about the global market or the national market? Why do I care about those?
It just opens the possibility of more people who see the property.
Okay, so that would probably be in this plan of action and the questions, because that's me exposing the property. We're talking about the market, I'm talking about the housing market as a whole. We're gonna talk about the housing market as a whole. Why does my client care, or why do I care about talking about the global market or the national market? Does it really affect them in their house?
The global, how does the global affect them in their house?
It doesn't, right? What about the national? Does the national?
For sure.
Okay, how does the national market affect your house?
Because you're in that market.
Okay.
It's pretty simple, I mean, you're in that market, so there's something.
Well, we're in the national market, but okay, let's take
Location and stuff like that too.
yeah, so let's take Salt Lake County, for example. Is the market different in Salt Lake City versus Harriman? Okay, so why do I want to know Salt Lake City's market if I'm selling a home in Harriman, or do I? Because that's what the national market is. The national market is not my market. The national is the country's market, okay? And inside the national market, there's lots of little markets. Do I care about it?
Maybe that will show you the rate of like migration within the country.
Okay,
If there's a lot of people leaving Salt Lake County and that's affecting that market, but they're leaving towards Utah County, that's gonna increase your price because the demand is increasing.
okay.
Is that?
Okay, so if you're watching those specifics, now the challenge with that is how many markets are in Salt Lake? How many markets do you know of?
many cities are there?
Okay, so is the city based on market? Is inside a city, is neighborhoods, like let's take Sugar House for example. Is there parts of Sugar House, are you familiar with Sugar House? Is there parts of Sugar House that are more valuable than other parts of Sugar House? Okay, so if I take 7th East and I'm buying a home west of 7th East versus a home east of 7th East, is there a different market there?
Oh, yeah.
Like how much different?
There's some pretty big significant differences in the.
Yeah, we're talking maybe like $600,000 difference between one street, right? This street could be selling for $400,000 and this could be selling for $800,000.
Kind of like Sandy, how like you get below like 13th East
Yeah.
versus above 13th.
Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this up is in reality, what market do they really care about? They care about the CMA, what their house is doing. But the reason I bring up all of these is because what do you think they are hearing about?
I think more people are gonna be exposed to their home, get to see it.
Because of their knowledge from what they're watching and listening to. When you hear about real estate, we're not specifically talking, like I'm looking at this right here. This is not Sugar House. This is Salt Lake County. And we've already established there's lots of different markets and like the homes could be appreciating in Riverton and be declining in Magna the same month. Does that make sense? So the only reason I talk about these two is because they're hearing this. This is what we talk about. When I say there's 42, the median day in the market is 42 days, I'm referring to Salt Lake County. If they are familiar with the local market, I'm going to be addressing that. But if their CMA in their neighborhood is actually not at 42, it's at 72, but I come in and tell them, and I don't talk about the global market, the national market, or any of that, I don't talk about any of that, and I tell them, oh yeah, your home average day on market's 72 days, and the other agent said it was 42, now I have a disconnect. But if I address that and I say, hey, the global market's doing this, the national market's doing this, the local market's doing this, and now let's look at yours. Now I've kind of given them a path that says, this is what I'm doing, this is what your house is doing. Does that make sense? If I give them that information, because you'll have this experience, I guarantee you, if you go out and listing homes. You'll show up with your CMA, and there'll be a home that's not on your CMA that they know about. And you didn't include it because it didn't even look like their house. It wasn't even like their house, but it was in their neighborhood. They're familiar with that house, so they're comparing that house to theirs, and you didn't include it. And so in their mind, they're like, well, you didn't give me the information, so that's why my house is lower. And now all of a sudden you have to backpedal and you have to explain yourself. That's why I start here. This is like a 30-second conversation. This is like a 30-second conversation. This is like 5-minute conversation, and then the rest of the time's on my CMA. But I don't miss these because if their knowledge of the market is a global knowledge, I need to address that. If their knowledge is a national market, I need to address that. If I skip it, then there's going to be a disconnect. Does that make sense? Okay, so where can I find those? Anybody know where you find?
Like the global market?
Uh-huh.
Where do we find the global market?
So in the UAR and realestate.com, not realestate.com, it is, let's see, Utah Real Estate. Yeah, realtor.com and the UAR are the two that have those in there. So the UAR has a statistics thing and you can go and find all of the country stuff. You can print it out, it's got a nice graph. I just take those with me, especially if I'm talking to an analytical. If I'm talking to an analytical, I'll pull the graph out and I'll show them. If I'm talking to an expressive or a driver or somebody who doesn't care about the graphs as much, I'll just talk about it. Okay? Okay, and then the last thing, what's the last thing I do?
Close.
close. Okay, so you can see this method that we went through. First, I told them all this. Now I went through the actual process of doing it. Now I'm going to summarize it and close, okay? Talked about you wanted to go here. In my close, this is the marketing. Do you have any questions? You've already chosen me. We've already worked on the price. Now it should be a real easy close for our transaction. Okay? Any questions on that? So in your book, all these questions that I said are actually in this book too. So there's powerful closes for listing presentation. Master close runs through this whole thing. 21 listing questions. This is the presentation we just went through with added questions in it. So all of these things are available for you guys to do. What I would suggest is you take this outline and you create a presentation that's unique to you. Okay? Any questions? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll start doing the activities management and that's all we'll do this morning. Okay? 5 minutes. Perfect.